I guess to give the audience maybe a little preview, I was thinking that you should call this episode Eric Almost Quit because we made him read this.
Yeah, it was really, really,
Eric was
vociferously against this article, these three articles. Did you read all three, guys?
I read two.
Yeah.
What's the third one? Did he make a third one, or was there like a rejoinder?
The third one is a picture of Baudrillard, and Baudrillard is of course not mentioned, but it says why clarity matters.
Oh, I think I read that one. So I must have not read the middle one.
There's three. There's Derrida face, Hegel face, Baudrillard face.
Okay, I think I read two of the three.
How continental philosophers argue. Is continental philosophy unclear because the subject material is hard, and then the blue sky way of arguing? Those are the three.
Oh, the blue sky way of arguing? I thought there was only two that was about this.
The blue sky one is from the 17th, is from 3 days ago.
But is that one about this, or is that about something else?
Yeah, it's about this. It's just more Twitter reaction. He's just pointing out how people were being mean to him.
Oh, yeah.
Telling him he can't read, being taking snipes at him.
And to be clear,
you're missing the Baudrillard one, though, because the Baudrillard one is November 14th called Why Clarity Matters. And it's also on
I have that one.
The superiority of... So you probably didn't read the Hegel one then, Victor.
Well, I read the first one. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. I think...
Let's explain what we're talking about, because not everyone's going to be on philosophy Twitter as we are. So I will say in hindsight, I regret this.
This is Substack, too. This is not even Twitter.
But it was on Twitter. The reactions were on Twitter.
Spilled over.
So look, the reason we're covering this is because it was on philosophy Twitter, which Eric's not on.
No, I don't understand what's happening.
I was more interested. This is news, right? Because news and events don't really come from philosophy Twitter. It's only like once every 2 years or so, there's a big blow up. The tweet about this article got 500,000 views. So it breached containment. It was in the wider population. Exactly. And because we're a philosophy podcast, we'd be remiss to not cover the one bit of news that came out of philosophy Twitter and philosophy Substack.
Would we be remiss?
Well, I think but to add to that, right?
I think we'd be smart not to touch this.
It went viral on Twitter, not actually because it was good, but I would say it went viral because people were dunking on it so hard. I don't know that, after a bunch of dunks, and a lot of people even a lot of analytic philosophers on Twitter were dunking on this, right? So it's not it's even analytic. And one of my favorite responses was kind of, which I don't know, this could lead into conversations about what was there even a grain of truth to what he was talking about? I mean, that'll be interesting because I think there is. And I feel like we've all acknowledged that there is a grain of truth, but it's a tiny grain in how bad his argument was. But I remember someone, I think I shared it in the group.
Oh,
what happened?
Oh my God. Oh, gross!
Did you pull liquid? Did you pull liquid on your vape?
No, it's not. This is a WD-40 straw. Holy shit! WD-40.
Oh, bro, you got some WD-40 in your mouth?
That is so disgusting,
dude. That shit's poison, eh?
Oh, actually,
yeah.
Okay,
water displacement.
You should probably go rinse
strength.
your mouth out because that shit's poison.
You should continue. I'm gonna go rinse my mouth.
Wow.
Okay, so
should have done that in the pregame.
So I think the reactions to this, and even analytic philosophers. I mean, one of my favorite responses was from this guy Enzo Rossi, who's a political theorist, kind of analytic, but he's sort of a Marxist too. But I guess an analytic Marxist. That's a kind of an aside. But he was posting this article, How Continental Philosophers Argue, and he was how to go viral. Make a basically correct and well-known point very badly. All the holdouts invested in denying the almost obvious will come out of the woodwork and pretend that your bad argument is representative of the camp they oppose. So what I think that's kind of getting to, which is sort of how I felt, is clearly a lot of critical what people call continental philosophy and, has a clarity problem. We talked about it a lot when we were doing our arc on Lacan. I mean, we were talking about how look at how Bruce Fink is putting these super difficult ideas into clear form. And I believe we might have even all agreed that Lacan might have just been a snobby French prick for writing that way, right? So there is an obvious grain of truth here. but he argued it in this article so badly that, as Enzo Rossi, I think, is correctly pointing out here, it almost like allows people who want to deny that there is like a problem of clarity in continental philosophy to be like, see how stupid, like nothing to see here. Like there is no problem. Look at how badly this guy's arguing it. Like that's sort of how I felt, because it was atrocious, like all the articles. And I want to point out that it's written by this guy, this Substacker who's like 22 or 21. And when you look at his photo, I mean, I hate to like say it's just the ultimate stereotype, but he was just like, I haven't been to philosophy conferences in a while. I mostly go to political theory conferences or political science ones now, but I have been to like analytic philosophy conferences. And he just looks like right off that assembly line. He's like, and like right off of that.
He's wearing a shirt that says "effective altruism" on it.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. He's got effective altruism. He's like, and he just like looks like one of those guys who'd be in the audience and be like, "Excuse me, I feel like I detect a reductio in your argument." Like it's just like he is like the most. So I don't know. That was like my initial reaction. I have like quite a bit to say too about like his substantive argument and like how silly it is and how I feel like he even commits some of the errors that he accuses continental philosophers of committing, which I thought was kind of funny. But anyway.
Well, now I feel like I'm just hopping on a dunk train.
Well, he's right.
This young kid blogger who's written these articles that are basically just rehashing like a so-called square type of argument about continental philosophers not being clear, like Judith Butler, like Derrida, like we were complaining about Lacan. It's easy to read tons of Lacan and then start complaining about how difficult it is to read. But he's just saying how continental philosophers argue in quotation marks, and then the opening line is like an analogy about dogs wearing sweaters is continental philosophers making arguments. And it's like, oh my God. Okay. So this is just going to be a trolling shit piece. This is a shit post. It's rage bait.
It's not.
It's nothing.
It's not. He's not.
That's all it is. It's just someone complaining. It's someone complaining. And what do you do when you complain about something? When a student in the classroom is acting out and being negative, it's because they want attention. That is exactly what it is. This is a young 21-year-old person whose brain is still developing, who is wanting attention and is complaining about something.
Now, look, I know you are a fan of repurposing internet terms to mean whatever you want them to mean. Like gooning, for example. Now you're doing it.
That wasn't me.
You're repurposing gooning, and you're also repurposing rage bait. Because for it to be rage bait, there has to be self-awareness on the part of the poster.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit posting, rage baiting. I didn't say.
No, but I think he's sincere.
I think you're ascribing intention where there's no evidence that the intention exists. Okay, I want to say what he's right about, which is that Judith Butler is a very annoying writer.
Yeah.
Clarity is not her problem, though. Similar with Hegel, because he focuses on those two specifically, and yeah, they are annoying writers. Always Derrida though lumped in there. It's just like, why is Derrida's picture on?
Yeah,
here?
did he even quote Derrida? I think he did. He did at one point. But also, did you guys find it like, I don't know? I felt like with a couple of the quotes, like even the Butler quotes, I feel like. I was like, I read it and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what she's talking about. Like, I don't like,
yeah.
Like I was like, yeah,
sure
like I understand what she's saying here.
Pretty sure he's getting it completely wrong. As difficult as they are, he wasn't even interpreting the quotes to say what his criticism of them was saying.
Well, he also picked like the easiest passage from Hegel. It's like the beginning of Phenomenology of Spirit, which is, there's much harder choices that you could have made if you're going to select.
Well, should we try, like, let's see, like this first quote that he takes from Butler in how continental philosophers quote unquote argue. Like I thought, like, I don't know, let's see, can we understand what she says here? She says, the move from a structuralist account in which capital is understood to structure social relations in relatively homologous ways to a view of hegemony in which power relations are subject to repetition, convergence, and rearticulation, brought the question of temporality into the thinking of structure and marked a shift from a form of Althusserian theory that takes structural totalities as theoretical objects to one in which the insights into the contingent possibility of structure inaugurate a renewed conception of hegemony as bound up with contingent sites and strategies of the rearticulation of power. Now, wordy as fuck, and I would even say somewhat obnoxious, but like,
And that is one sentence.
And I was pretty sure, like and also very out of context. But like I was pretty sure she was just describing like two different ways of thinking about power as like either contingent or determined. Am I wrong about that? Or
no. It's not hard at all. Well, I shouldn't say it's not hard at all. There's a lot of words in here, but it's if you know the words, then you know what she's saying is that we're moving from a structuralist account like Althusser to something more contingent, shifting over time.
The temporal part is because structuralism can't account for temporal change and thus contingency, because everything that happens in a structuralist account is already determined by its position in the structure.
Yeah.
Hegemony, which I'm thinking is coming from Gramsci. Gramsci's the famous Italian Marxist who comes up with the notion of hegemony. Yeah, so people are moving more to a Gramscian than an Althusserian account, which Althusserian is associated with a structuralist account. Not structuralist, I guess, in the Saussurean sense, but structural in the sense that Althusser has the arguments about ideological and repressive state apparatuses.
That's what that means. But I recognized this sentence, and I didn't see anyone point this out. But we read this sentence on the podcast before.
Oh, really?
Pre episode 50, I want to say. But it was in the context of this sentence won the worst sentence award. Do you remember that?
Was it the one I just read?
Yeah, it was the Philosophy and Literature Journal it was like late 90s, like 98 or 99, gave this sentence the worst sentence award of that year. And I think a post-colonial guy or girl got the second one, like Spivak, I think got prize too, or Baba or something.
Oh, that's so funny.
No,
I didn't know
Homie Baba. Yeah, I found it. There's a 1999 Guardian article in The Guardian about the world's worst writing. Each year, Philosophy and Literature, an academic journal, runs a bad writing contest to celebrate the most stylistically lamentable passages found in scholarly books and articles. The only condition is that the entries be non-ironic. Deliberate parody cannot be allowed in a field where unintended self-parody is so. Yeah, so Judith Butler wins first prize, Homie Baba wins second, and someone called Steve Lazine wins third prize. I don't know who that is, but yeah. So he's pinched that sentence from a previous awards ceremony,
and he claims that he just opened it up to a random page too. Right after the quote, he's like, "To avoid accusations of cherry picking, I opened up a random page from Butler's Gender Trouble."
No, that's for the I think that's for the next one on Lacan. No, this first one was very carefully cherry picked, actually, out of the Guardian. If he's looking at the same thing, yeah, to find he probably just like Googled like bad Judith Butler, or maybe he's using ChatGPT in this, so he probably like ChatGPT like bad Judith Butler sentence, and then it picked up.
Probably just searched or typed bad continental philosophy. Want to try it?
You can give it a shot. See, like,
why not?
If you just in bad Judith Butler sentence.
I'm gonna do. What is the most unclear sentence from Continental?
I mean, I got the Guardian article philosophy again when I typed that. Bad Judith Butler sentence. Second one is world's worst writing, Guardian.
Oh my God.
What?
It gives the other quote that he used. It gives Hegel phenomenology of spirit.
Oh, really?
But then runner-up is Heidegger.
So this guy's writing
Heidegger
his
from
blog
what?
posts like most undergrads write an essay that's due tomorrow.
It's Heidegger's Being in Time. Not even.
Okay, read me that, because I'll bet you I'll be able to understand what it is. I feel like I know that book pretty well.
ChatGPT didn't give much. It just says the nothings.
Oh, that's all it gave?
And then it gives
Nothing.
then it gives
That's pretty good.
Derrida, Lacan, Deleuze, and Guattari. So
all famously difficult.
But no, he cherry picked the worst sentence award sentence and then said, "Oh, look, this is representative of things that make no sense to me."
Which, by the way, we were able to make sense of that worst sentence, at least somewhat. Like, I think we all agree it's a bad sentence, though. Like, I don't think any of us would be like, yeah, Butler needed to write that way.
In her defense, she was using the jargon of two different disciplines and saying these are what the disciplines say. She's not even jargoning for her own sake necessarily there.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to say that, like, so he basically starts the first article by just having a bunch of these quotes, and then like doesn't really make, like, he just makes a really like he's like, I can't understand these are just gibberish. And then he goes on.
Therefore, they are not arguing.
Therefore, they're not arguing. But then he goes on to kind of give an account of a few different ways in which he thinks that continental philosophers tend to argue.
And continental philosophers is Butler. He mentions Derrida once in the beginning, and every single quotation is Butler.
Yeah, and I also felt like, well, he doesn't talk about any of the existentialists or phenomenologists who I think are difficult, but, you know, I think fairly clear. Like, I don't know. I think Merleau-Ponty is like fairly clear. I think Heidegger is difficult, but the funny thing about Heidegger is like he's one of these weird cases where like I did feel persuaded that he needed to write the way that he did for what he was trying to do. Like I understood, like it made sense to me. Maybe with some of the later French stuff, I don't know. I might be like slightly more sympathetic. But then he kind of makes these broad generalizations about like where he'll give like I think the first one he talks about is like a bit through, is like maybe a third of the way through the article. He says, you know, one way continental philosophers argue is by brazenly asserting that A is not B, where B is the obvious thing everyone would expect it to be, but instead C, where C is some random thing that makes no sense. They act as if they've established by this that A is C, and anyone who thinks it's B is naive, even though they've been given no argument for it and the assertion is barely intelligible. For example, to be human is not purely biological, but instead always made coherent and legible through the social arrangement in which one partakes, to partake in being and having one's being partaken by the other. But like it also kind of makes sense, to be honest. Like
that's what Zizek does all the time.
But what was like infuriating about the article is like he just makes such generalizations and like lacks a lot of specificity. He like has a few examples, but then doesn't go back to the examples and be like, see, these examples I gave you are doing the thing that I'm talking about. He just kind of like leaves the examples to stand on their own and then goes on to talk about patterns that like I did recognize, right? So like I was kind of, like you said, Pills, like Zizek does that all the time. And I think that others do that all the time. But what was kind of funny in the example that he like made up was that it made sense. I mean, isn't that sentence just saying like reducing human beings to biology is like making a mistake, which seems right. But I guess his complaint is like, that's not making an argument, I guess. I don't know.
Why is that A is not B, but instead C? That infuriates him that some people do that. Like, what I don't understand.
Well, because it lacks an argument, he says.
Like, that is so legit. People do that all the time. And then the Butler example.
This is egregious that he thinks that this is continental. He claims this is a continental method of argument. This is literally the structure of science to say that A is not B, the common sense response that most people think. It's actually C, this other thing that people don't know about.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like that's a basic essay structure you're taught. Like that's an introductory strategy. When you're introducing your thesis of your article is C. Everyone expects, A to be B, but I'm going to argue that it's actually not so B, it's actually C. Like that is a very traditional way of introducing your argument in an essay. Yet he somehow hates it when Judith Butler does it. And Judith Butler doesn't even do it here. Gender is not to culture as sex is to nature. Butler is saying A is not to B as C is to D. Actually, gender is put before as gender is the discourse through which sex is like constructed as not constructed, as pre-discursive. It is put into a pre-discursive neutral space. It's such an easy quote. Like that, he couldn't have chosen an easier quote to understand and not fit what he's saying it's doing.
It's almost like it comes from this sort of analytic impatience that I think like some especially young like kind of late, like lazy, I would say like not willing to do the work if it's not structured in exactly the way that I want. Impatience, because I think, I mean, there might be cases where this is not true, but at least in my experience of reading quite a lot of, and maybe sometimes it doesn't happen, but for the most part, like they'll make that claim and then like you keep reading and then it becomes clear like what the argument for that is. Usually, usually it's just like, he's like, you made a claim, like you have to put like, if this, you have to give it to me in an argumentative structure, like immediately. Cause like, I just don't believe him that. Now, look, I think it's fair to say.
He's right, it happens. Like Zizek's like, oh, we think the dads now are so good because they don't beat their kids. But in fact, the dads now are have a much more repressive ideology because you're forced to obey without coercion.
Exactly.
But there's nothing continental about this. This is a basic form of argumentation that you learn in grade 12.
Yeah. I love the very next extremely traditional essay writing strategy that he does not like when Judith Butler does it is for A, B, and then acting like you've established B. As in, for Beauvoir, the feminine is not something that operates blah, blah, blah. Judith Butler is describing the view of another person. For A, as in for Beauvoir, B, this is the case. And then he's like, Judith Butler's now treating B like it's true, and then goes on to another quote where she says something else Beauvoir believes. For Beauvoir, women are the negative of men, blah, blah, blah. For Irigaray, the particular dialectic, blah, blah, blah. This is not an argument. No, she's not arguing. She's describing the views of other philosophers.
Exactly.
For A, B. For C, Irigaray, D. She's not even saying, she's not acting like those are established facts now.
She's not even saying that she necessarily agrees with them. She's just describing these different views.
Like, he just has no idea what is going on in the text here, and it's annoying him. And he thinks he's figured it out for A, B, but it doesn't make it true if you weirdly phrase A believed B as for A, B. What are you talking about? That's what she's saying. Judith Butler is saying Beauvoir believed this, and Beauvoir believed that, and Irigaray believed that, and then you haven't quoted enough to see what she's actually where she's going with this. You've just given us that, and that's it, and you're upset about it, and really, that's a thing you're supposed to do in your writing is what does this other person believe? What does this other person believe? These are other people who have talked about the same thing I am talking about, but he doesn't like it when you do that. Okay, great.
Now, so that we are not accused of a strawman fallacy, what he is saying, what he's describing is just a garden variety appeal to authority fallacy. Now, I think we've established that based on this context, that is not what Judith Butler has done here. But has a continental philosopher at some point done an appeal to authority fallacy? I think they probably have. Are continental philosophers the only discipline that is guilty of ever having done a appeal to authority fallacy? No, this is not particular at all. It's not the case in this example, and it's not the case generally. Has it happened? Probably. Does it happen more in continental philosophy than in some other discipline? I don't know. He doesn't know. Even if it's possible to prove that, he has not done that.
It's not even an appeal to authority. And what he's presented is just someone describing someone else's views. If I said Chomsky believed that deep grammar structured the language, am I saying that's true? No, I'm just saying Chomsky believed it.
That is what's happening here. But I'm saying even if this were to happen, even if, I'm sure we do this on the podcast constantly, is refer by name to someone who made an argument without re-establishing the argument itself. We're just referencing the argument that was made because in this context, we agree with that. It doesn't stand to be proven. But every single discipline does this. Every single discipline, including analytic philosophy.
If you do it in the best example of people who do this are the scholastics, because they say Aristotle believed this, therefore it is true. Like an appeal to authority was literally a canonical method of scholastic philosophy. Here it is in the Bible, therefore it must be true, and we have to go by this. Here it is.
And Marxists do it when they talk about Marx, for sure.
That just goes for anyone in a group who's named by someone else's names. That's like Kantian, Freudian, Keynesian. if you're in that group, you're in that group because you agree with the name of the master.
Everyone does
People
it.
do it until they figure out it's wrong, until they figured out something Freud said just doesn't match the facts, until they figure out something Marx said just doesn't match the facts or needs to be updated, or until they realize something in the Bible doesn't match the facts that natural science is uncovering.
And we don't need to belabor the point. I think the point is this is in no way particular to continental philosophy, and more to the point, it didn't happen in the example that he gave.
Oh, yeah.
No, it did not. The example for this thing that he doesn't like for AB is just Butler describing Beauvoir's view of something, and that's it.
It's pretty funny. It's true. That's how poorly he's understanding these arguments, is like the example he gives isn't even doing the thing, which the thing he's just also complaining about everyone does. Although I do wonder, Pills, there is like a weird corner of analytic philosophy that's like almost like ahistoric, that just like doesn't like to talk about any like what anybody said and is just only making arguments, like is only like arguments all the way down. It's like almost like formal logic. And I wonder if like that little corner of analytic philosophy maybe actually like doesn't do that, right? Like doesn't just like ever appeal to a figure. It'll just be like arguments all the way down.
I can't imagine that even being possible. Like arguing like you are the first person to speak words in this language is not possible. Like that is the definition of speaking into a void.
No, but that's not what I mean. I don't mean it like that.
You just can't do it. There are arguments that have been made before you, and you're either citing them or not citing them, but you can't just come in with no assumptions.
That's not what he's saying. He's
the
saying,
closest
he's saying
thing
not,
would be mathematics.
Well, I think for example, like sometimes in applied ethics, like these weird like ethical arguments where they'll like try to argue, like it'll be like all thought experiments. Like, so I remember I read one that was defending like violence to protect animals, right? And it's like it didn't like talk about what anyone else, like it referenced quickly like arguments that it thought were wrong, right? That he thought were wrong. And then just basically said, like, you know, if we imagine we see puppies being like tortured in a basement, like none of us would think that it would be bad to go in and maybe use force to stop it. And then he says, well, why wouldn't that apply to like factory farming? And like, you know, I don't know that that's really, you know, it's like this weird, it's like all thought experiments and then like kind of propositional logic.
I think it's any of the areas of analytic philosophy that are really dependent on modal logic, and a lot of them just use it for fun to do these thought experiments.
It's just like very narrow. It's just like very narrow and weird. It's like a very narrow thing.
Yeah, like the examples I can think of in analytic philosophy that are heavily dependent on modal logic are epistemology. So they'll say, in this kind of world, if you had known this, could you know this? Would this count as knowledge in this world? Or the other one is religion, or like, I don't know what they call it. Theology? Is it theology? Where you say, if this is the world, could God have created this world if he had these specific attributes? Can you deduce that by this world, this kind of God exists? But I think you're right that much less than other disciplines, they don't refer to the ideas of other people so much as the arguments of other people. And a lot of the times these arguments can be like laid out formally with symbolic logic, saying if this is the type of world that exists, then we would expect this to happen. So I think you're right about that perhaps it's less dependent on shorthand referencing masters. However, I think even there, as with any other discourse, an appeal to authority is permitted by the in-group if the in-group is who you're speaking to.
It's also kind of interesting how at the beginning of the article, I believe it's the first one, he starts mentioning like who's included in Continental, and it's kind of funny. Like he includes Hegel, and like I get, but like this is puzzling to me that Kant, because like Kant is no clearer like than Hegel. Like I just like, but yet analytic philosophers like kind of see him as like they like to adopt him and pretend that like Kant is somehow analytic. And like, obviously I know that there's some historical reasons and some lineage reasons about like why there's like a line from Hegel to like all these other, to like, you know, people who are associated with continental philosophy, like, you know, especially via Kojève, right? Kojève kind of ends up influencing like all of French philosophy by his reading of Hegel. But it was just kind of weird to me, like
continental analytic divide.
Yes, exactly, and so is Nietzsche, and It's just bizarre that he's so dismissive that he wants to include, when there's also so many analytic philosophers who will draw on Hegel and Nietzsche, for example. And there's definitely a bunch of people who drew on Hegel, including John Rawls. You know, it's just weird.
Yeah, there's also like Richard Rorty, and there's even like I don't know if it's University of Pittsburgh, but there's something called the Pittsburgh School, which is just analytics, studying Hegel or Hegelian analytics. So this guy is not only an idiot when it comes to continental philosophy, he's an idiot when it comes to analytic philosophy too.
It's funny that he reaches back, because in his later article, Blue Sky Way of Arguing, he says, if one said that analytic philosophy was nonsense, analytic philosophers wouldn't need to exhort the person to read, nor insult them. There he's referring to the responses he's gotten saying he can't read and they're insulting him. They would simply describe the clear successes, inventing the field of anthropics, the simulation argument, infinite ethics, the drowning child argument, many arguments for veganism, population ethics, and so on. That continentals are unwilling to do that is suspicious. So continental philosophers have no inventions like that to put to their name.
Yeah. Wait, analytic philosophy. Analytic philosophy is so influential because everyone's a vegan for rational reasons now. And I don't even know about the drowning child argument. I don't even know what that is. But you know what? I do know what it is. Ideology. Alienation. How often have you heard the terms ideology and alienation this year? Or unconscious? Or fucking authenticity and bad faith? Like, we're talking Marx, Schopenhauer, Freud, Sartre, Heidegger, half of literary studies, half of film studies, hermeneutics. Like, we can take hermeneutics too. Like, Jesus. This is embarrassing. Yeah, logical arguments for veganism and the drowning baby argument.
Yeah.
I hear those every day.
Yeah, no. Existentialism, like massively popular and drove a whole type of psychology. No phenomenology either, which is driving cognitive science and many other fields across the humanities and social sciences. Wildly
the analytics
popular.
are finally catching on and realizing that Merleau-Ponty had smart things to say after decades of ignoring them in all of cognitive science and activism.
Neuroplasticity, all the arguments.
And you're getting a little dangerous going back to Hegel, too. So do you include Leibniz in there? Do we not now have calculus? We can't say calculus. Do we include Descartes as a continental philosopher now? You can't say
French.
Cartesian fields, mathematics, and all the scientific work he did.
Dude, the fucking term worldview, Weltanschauung. Worldview is from continental philosophy.
It's a very sloppy line drawing by him. Very sloppy.
It's funny. It's fun to think about.
We've all marked philosophy essays, and I was trying to think, like, what would I give this? If this was a first year class, I would not fail it because it's so obviously someone who's not familiar with the discipline. Because the thesis is continental philosophy is blah. The second I saw that, I would probably return the paper to the student and be like, "This is a 3-page paper. You can't have anything that says continental philosophy because there's no way to prove an argument about continental philosophy in 3 pages."
Exactly. It's too general. The scope is too broad.
If you want to make an essay this long, you can restrict it to maybe one author, maybe Judith Butler.
If you want to just talk
but
about
not all of Judith
just
Butler, just one book, because you're only quoting one
just
book anyway. So say, in Gender Trouble, Judith Butler makes these 3 errors. That's a solid 5-page essay. All of continental philosophy does this. It's like an immediate fail in an upper year philosophy course.
I agree.
But to be fair, if I received this paper, I would try to interpret it. I would try to interpret it with the alternative thesis of Judith Butler in Gender Trouble argues like this. But even based on those arguments, which are all the ones we've read so far are actually just incorrect. So if I had received this paper from a student, even having had graciously interpreted a different thesis so that they might be able to pass the assignment, based on the argument alone, I would still fail it.
And then the second paragraph ends with a quote. It ends with a quote from Michael Humer, by the way, who is, I did check, he is cited not with his own page, but he is in the Stanford Encyclopedia. He is also a libertarian anarcho-capitalist. So that's the caliber of person. You You don't argue against somebody and then cite someone who is already biased against them.
Yeah, but I mean, every philosopher is going to have biases.
Well, surprise, surprise, he put Derrida as the cover of this thing. And then his one argument against Derrida is that Searle didn't like him, despite the fact that the two of them had a back and forth conflict in which Derrida absolutely dumpstered Searle.
And Searle also
Read Limited Inc.
Searle was also like good friends with Foucault and was also friendly with Bourdieu. And there's that like famous recording of him talking about how, which we've covered on this podcast, actually, how Searle like had Foucault in California, like giving talks and Searle, for some reason, I'm not sure why, spoke French like super well, like was like, and he was like talking to Foucault and he was like, you know, why do you write so unclear? Like now you're giving your presentation and you're saying everything clear as day, like I would, but then but in your books, it's like, why is it? And supposedly Foucault was like, well, in France, people will think you're childish and naive if you write too clearly.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the anecdotes are always fun, but I mean, to quote Searle against Derrida as if Searle had the authority on that relationship, that's bad faith if we want to continue with the Continental affect. It's bad faith considering Derrida responded to Searle's criticism at length, book length, and Searle just didn't respond. And I can rehash this, actually, it's relevant because it's the first Analytic versus Continental debate, and it's probably the one that's done at the highest level of scholars in the field. They got in an argument over J.L. Austin, Analytic philosopher, and Searle said Derrida did a low-level critique or something like that. And then that's when he cited Foucault, saying that Derrida is an obscurantist terrorist. Derrida wanted to respond, but Searle, like a bitch, refused to give permission to reprint his critique of Derrida. So then Derrida wrote Limited Inc., which cites Searle's entire article to get around the fact that Searle refused to have his article published. And then in Limited Inc., Derrida claims that their interpretations of J.L. Austin, that Derrida is far closer to J.L. Austin's argument, like his true heir, while Searle is closer to Searle's own caricature of Continental philosophy. And I don't think Searle ever responded to that. And then, this is back to the article. If we want to get to the next highest level debate of Analytic versus Continental, Derrida also got roped in. It's referenced by Lil Bulldog here. Yeah. It's the so-called hoax or the so-called affair, right, in which Derrida was referenced and asked a question about it, and he responded. And Derrida's like, why is my face on the cover of this thing when you didn't attack a single one of my arguments? I'm not even mentioned in it. And then I think they apologized or retracted. But the same thing, I thought it was so funny that the same thing happened here, where he put Derrida's face on it and just dropped in a single quotation and then included a ChatGPT quotation about how Derrida believes in cats or something. It's just like Derrida said to SoCal and Rigmont, like, you can't expect me to respond to this seriously when it's done so unseriously. Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about this exactly. Although it's funny, just moving on to like his other accusation against Continental philosophy. Oh, I love this one. This one I feel like does happen all the time. So like I do sort of, and he says another favorite argument is X, if you rephrase it, can be made to sound vaguely conservative or vaguely like the sort of thing that a person who believes we can know some things are objectively the case would think is not X. Continental philosophers will rephrase their opponent's arguments uncharitably. Note that the rephrased statements sound like the sort of thing that all their Continental friends would sneer at and then act like they've refuted it. Oh, sorry. You skipped my favorite one. Oh, did I? I thought we talked about that one. The one, the word association. Oh, sorry. The word association. You're right. That one is really good. We can come back to that one and do this one first. Although it's just a complicated way of saying a straw man argument, and to say that Continental philosophy in particular is more especially guilty. Like, obviously it happens, but to say it's exclusive or more particular to Continental philosophy than any other type of discourse, it's just like, like A, it's unprovable. It's unprovable even on its own terms. But B, he uses ChatGPT as his evidence for the argument when it's like completely not exclusive. A straw man fallacy is the most common type of fallacy.
No, nothing here is
is.
exactly. I was about to say that happens, but I do kind of think like, so I will say like, I spent my dissertation a lot of the time engaging with people, with some continental democratic thinkers, philosophers, and I do feel like this was kind of like common. I mean, the way that I think like this tremendous amount of straw manning of John Rawls, of just like, oh, he's like someone who believes that we can abstract from all knowledge. And it's like, no, he doesn't think that. Like that was said by so many continental thinkers. And I agree with Pills, though. It's not a problem solely of continental philosophy. But I will say that like maybe what I am slightly sympathetic to is analytic philosophy might be kind of, because of the way that it does its method, is like particularly good at protecting against straw manning. I think like straw manning in analytic philosophy is like, well, unless they're talking about continental philosophers, I guess, because they're definitely straw man. But I guess like when it comes to like each other or like certain kinds of arguments, like I think there is some kind of, so this one, I guess just like I felt myself most agreeing with it. Maybe I also agreed with the one that we're about to talk to, the third one. But
if he found an example of that, that would have been awesome. But then I was really disappointed to see that that's where the ChatGPT generated quote went.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get that he's trying to be funny, but like while you're talking about someone else straw manning positions, you get ChatGPT to write like Derrida to prove that Derrida does this. That's ridiculous.
Yes, that's so bad. Man, find a real example, dude. Like, what are you doing here? There are tons. There are tons of examples.
Because that is actually a really, like, you feel that temptation. Like this, I'm evaluating this claim like almost aesthetically, because like I'm saying X, does it sound like something a conservative would say? Okay, I'm not going to agree with it. Like that is actually an interesting temptation to warn people on the left
exactly
against, but it's disappointing that he couldn't find an actual quote to go along with that. And then after that,
which suggests he's lazy, because he's not willing to actually go in and find an example.
I mean, he could have just used ChatGPT and said, "Find me an example of this," and then he calls it a Mott and Bailey argument, which I'm like, oh, well, that's not the same thing. A Mott and Bailey is like using a more obvious claim to hide a more ridiculous claim. That's not the same thing as
yeah.
saying,
Like at first he describes a straw man fallacy, then calls it a Mott and Bailey.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything more discrediting than a 20-year-old, actually dork not actually knowing the differences between informal fallacies?
I mean, I'm not interested in the Mott and Bailey thing at all. I don't think that's a logical fallacy. I think that's a informal, weird thing people do. I don't know.
It can be an informal fallacy. I mean, I think if what you're saying is a lot of the times people do this as just in an informal setting in an argument, that's true. That's just slimy argument. Well, slimy argument or informal fallacy, whatever you want to call it. He says continental philosophers will rephrase their opponent's arguments uncharitably. So it sounds like the sort of things that their continental friends will sneer at and then act like they've refuted them, which describes a straw man slimy argument, not a Mott and Bailey slimy argument. But the more egregious point here is not that he doesn't know the differences between the informal fallacies. It's that he used ChatGPT as an example of how continental philosophers do this. I don't know that Heidegger ever rephrased his opponent's argument to make them sound more conservative and then dismiss them. But how about this? In the spirit of charity, can we help him out? Can you think of any other examples?
I think Hart and Negri kind of did that.
I was gonna say this seems like a post 90s thing.
Maybe Butler might have done some. Maybe she did some straw manning about like when she talked about gender essentialism. Like I don't know, there might be like I'm suspecting. I could be wrong about this, but
in
but
philosophy though, you do have to be Like, if you're going to say that this is a bad move, then you have to be very clear about where you're strawmanning your opponent and where you're just rephrasing what they're saying or dropping what they're saying into a different context that brings out a different dimension that you didn't see before. Like, one of the most famous versions of this is what Kant does with Hume, right? It started a revolution in philosophy, and nobody accuses Kant of strawmanning Hume. Everyone accuses Kant of putting Hume in an entirely different light or bringing out an implication that Hume himself didn't like work out, depending on how you want to look at it with Kant's transcendental turn, right? So you have to draw the line very carefully between like, okay, rephrasing X to sound conservative to get people not to like this, and rephrasing X to bring out a very different dimension of it that is like truly there if you look at it like in this different way. I don't know. It's tough. But again, it can be a very legitimate move, but also
It can be.
Yeah, it is.
You have to be careful, though.
You have to be very careful that you're not just sort of posturing, saying like, ew, X sounds too much like a positivist claim, or X sounds too much like what, like, I don't like liberals, so okay, it sounds too much like a liberal.
Or like dualism, or dualism, this is dualism.
I was going to say Descartes is only ever mentioned negatively for this.
Like systems theory,
exactly.
for example, like Luhmann got that treatment, right? With systems theory, like, oh, you're talking about systems and cybernetics, you must be down for like the control society, like Deleuze was talking about. Like, no, he's not. That's not what systems theory is, but like that's what X sounds like if you rephrase it.
It is pretty rich, even though he doesn't know what a straw man is, to see him complaining about people straw manning in an article that is just a straw man. Because he says, Continental philosophers will rephrase their opponent's arguments uncharitably. Note that the rephrased statement sounds like the sort of thing that all their Continental friends sneer at, and then act like they've refuted them. He just gave the ultimate undermining of his own article.
Yeah.
You just say, analytic philosophers will rephrase their opponent's arguments uncharitably. I shouldn't say analytic philosophers, because no offense to analytic philosophers. Idiots will rephrase their opponent's arguments uncharitably. Noted that the rephrased statement sounds like the sort of things that their idiot friends sneer at, and then act like they've refuted them.
Axe grindy bloggers.
Yeah, he literally is doing that.
Yeah, the comment is like, the comment on the first one, powerful stuff, I'm sure. Like, indicating that he doesn't know. He's sure
He's
it
like,
is.
big if true. Big if.
If only, if only he knew.
Okay, the third method of argument is word association. Quote, Continental philosophers will start by making some vague statement about a thing. Then they will chain it together with other words that sound vaguely familiar, as if they've made a compelling argument. Now, this one stood out to me because he used the word chain. We talked about signifying chains just last week. And it doesn't actually come from Continental philosophy necessarily. It's psychoanalysis and structuralist anthropology. But anyway, distinctions don't matter. For example, quote, I think this is probably Butler again. I don't know. I
Probably
guess
Butler, but maybe not.
He doesn't actually say. So it says, quote, for Derrida, everything is always juxtaposed against its opposite, being against non-being, the masculine against the feminine. Femininity is always defined in relation to masculinity, the opposite, the unequal, the empty space against which masculinity is compared. The feminine juxtaposed against the masculine other. The feminine is constructed through negation, rendered coherent and intelligible through social relations, yet always exceeding any notion which would have enabled her to be intelligible. This sounds like Irrigare to me. It could be Butler too.
Hold on. I don't know if this is true. I'm going to have to grab this book and look at it. It's AI just told me this quote is from the book Goddess as Nature Towards a Green Feminist Theology, 1993 by Judith Deutsch Kornblatt. Okay, this can't be right. I'm going to get this book and check it out.
Well, then he has this example, but I don't know. What did you think about this pills? You said this one was your favorite, so.
Wait, I'm actually trying to find the source of this quote too. Did he just make this up? Maybe ChatGPT.
It might have been ChatGPT. He seemed he couldn't be bothered to actually go and find the many incomprehensible quotes that do exist in some continental philosophy, which is kind of funny. Like, it's so lazy.
This sounds like something Irigaray would say. But anyway, this example, wherever he got it from, doesn't do what he just said it does.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you go to Heidegger, remember Heidegger's essay Das Ding?
Yeah.
Where he says the thing is the gathering, and it comes from this word, which means like they have a parliament in Iceland or some shit. Whatever Heidegger is doing, that fits this much better than this one.
I had that same thought, actually.
But the question is this word game or associated words, is this used as an argument ever? Like, it resembles things that happen, but they are supplementary to the point. They indicate the point that is trying to be made. Like, if you think about who's playing word games, I mean, Heidegger fits the mold the most because he goes on at length about etymology. Derrida does some etymologies. He likes his etymologies to create like networks that exist. When you say one term, it implies kind of the field of terms around it, basic structuralist argument. Lacan does a bit of this, but even Heidegger's the best example of it. When Heidegger goes on about the thing and how the thing has all these other associations with it, nothing is proved by that on its own, because his point has to do with, you know, in the case of the thing, our originary terms were closer to the being of beings, or the original disclosure of the being of beings, that are other terms like object. He doesn't like the term object. That's why he chooses the word thing. But that's obviously not what the argument is. The argument is that we use the term object in philosophy and it has too much baggage. It's too singular, too separate from anything else. And the word thing is better at describing what's actually out there.
And then, of course, the Butler quote is, again, an extended passage of Butler talking about someone else's view on things, i.e. Irigaray, not Butler talking about her own view of things. So again, this is annoying, the way this is constructed. On the contrary, the female sex eludes the very requirements of representation, for she is neither other nor the lack, nor the lack. Those categories remaining relative to the Sartrean subject, imminent to that philogocentric scheme.
He mentions this in the next article too. He reads, I think it's the same quote, but he says, "All this strikes me as extremely confused. Women are not unrepresentable. There is a word for women. The sentence, X is unrepresentable, is self-defeating. For to write it, one must linguistically represent the thing that they are claiming cannot be represented." Like, dude, you are so close. You are so close to understanding the point here. But you can see there is this positivist view of language. Well, if there's a word for it, then the signified is real, solid, pointed to right there. But he mentions linear algebra. What about zero? Does zero represent something? When you say nothing, is nothing something, or is nothing a word?
I love how he's saying it like, haha, gotcha, Butler. Gotcha. You didn't.
The one thing Butler never thought of in 30 years of education was that she was using the word woman. Thank God we have him to point this out.
But how did you just say that? Ha ha! Gotcha.
It's such a 20-year-old, man. This is a real 20. This is a real 20-year-old who just like
so funny.
learned how to kind of use his brain.
We do just live in a world of just the peak unearned confidence. It's shocking. Yeah, continental philosophy just forgot to consider that there's words for things. That's why we're in this predicament. Which, by the way, I shouldn't have to say this, but it's not a continental argument. This is like a pre-modern, this is a Dark Ages argument debate about what the meaning of words is.
It's kind of amazing, though, that he used ChatGPT so much. Like, dude, you couldn't be bothered. Like, it's still kind of shocking. Like, when he talks about his last example, which like I kind of recognize maybe, he says, finally, a last method of arguing is to have some scare word that is both poorly defined and not argued against, then one will treat the fact that something is associated with the scare word as giving it bad karma. And then he's like, an example from ChatGPT. And then he just like, why not find an example? Like I'm sure I kind of know what you're talking about. I mean, the example he says, he's like, what we witness in the panini is not merely a culinary artifact, but a culmination of the neoliberal project's ontological violence. The panini, in its sleek compression, between the indifferent jaws of the press, reveals the logic of flattening that defines our epoch, the erasure of texture, the homogenization of taste, the disciplining of the mouth into docile consumption. It's kind of funny, actually.
I like this. ChatGPT, this is impressive.
ChatGPT did a good job here. It is, in every sense, the neoliberal sandwich, one that privatizes the act of nourishment into a transactional event between the subject and the commodity. I mean, that's pretty funny, I gotta say. Like, that's pretty good.
He did this in his title. I assume it's being ironic, but he said how continental philosophers argue in scare quotes. Yeah. Eric mentioned that before. This one, you know what? This one though, I'm tired. It's been an hour. I'm just going to concede this one. They do be doing that.
Yeah, they do definitely do that. Yeah, I kind of want to read the second paragraph of his GPT example because it continues to be funny about the panini. He's like, to ask whether the panini tastes good is already to capitulate to the neoliberal subjectivity. For taste here is no longer sensuous discernment, but a marketized metric of pleasure. The problem is not that the panini is bad. It is that the panini is neoliberal. And in being neoliberal, it participates in the grand conspiracy of flattening, of time into productivity, of affect into branding, of being into having. And like, so that, I mean, it's pretty good. Like, I gotta say, that's ChatGPT impressive. And you know, it's
that
funny,
sounds
like it sounds over the top, but like, I think I was just at a conference in Chicago and I was like watching a paper and the guy was just unironically talking. Like, it's so funny to me when people start talking about like the clock and how clock is like a neoliberal project or whatever. And how like before the clock, man, like we didn't, you know, we experienced like real time. And like, there's a sense in which that's true, but it's just, it can be framed in such kind of like, I don't know, nefarious kind of like sinister ways that are like, you know.
The clock that was invented by medieval monks for their prayer.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'd love to
clock time.
I'd love to know what the command he gave to ChatGPT to generate that bit of text was. Like, make a scary sounding passage out of involving a panini. That sounds kind of postmodern.
It is the best part of the essay.
Yeah, I'd love to put that back into AI and be like, yo, can you like break this down and tell me? I just put it back in. It says the provided text is an academic or philosophical critique that uses the everyday object of a panini as a metaphor for the social, economic, and political philosophies of neoliberalism. The passage as an example of applying postmodern or critical theory to culture and consumption. The author is using highly theoretical language to argue the following points. Oh my God, they're so long. Neoliberalism's impact on culture, blah, blah, blah. The panini as a metaphor for flattening, blah, blah, blah. Consumption as a transaction, blah, blah, blah.
Like, is that, like, maybe that passage is true. Like maybe the panini does signify some kind of neoliberal.
Yeah, like to him, this is like scare word mongering. Poorly defined and not argued against, but then ChatGPT kind of just blows him up with this nicely structured panini metaphor.
Yeah, he dismisses it outright as if there could be no insight there because it was written by ChatGPT as a parody. But this is actually an ad hominem argument. There could be an insight there. You can't dismiss it outright. That's fallacious.
There's an insight. Yeah, there might be an insight. I mean, it's funny though. I do feel like I recognize this argument, and recently, because I read this article not long ago about that term surveillance capitalism. Do you guys know that one? Surveillance capitalism.
Yeah, I read that.
And it's kind of a response to it, saying like in defense of surveillance capitalism, and the author basically accuses like
that's
people
Jody
who talk about.
Dean, right?
No, it's Shoshana Zuboff. Yeah. And basically this article kind of accuses Zuboff of doing what this guy's accusing, so like basically being like, what is really surveillance? And like you're associating what like targeted ads as like surveillance. Like, is that really surveillance? Like, it's not really surveillance. It's just like annoying. Anyway, he made an argument that was partly persuasive, partly not. But like I do think that so I guess the point is like I do think that like, I mean, I think about it more as what I like to think of as a kind of like hyperbolic Foucauldianism or something, where it's like you describe some social phenomenon in like such hyperbolically like sinister ways that it makes it sound like this deep dark structure, when it's like, okay, like it's like, okay, just get ad blocker. Like, I don't know, like use a VPN, like it's it's like, oh, surveillance capitalism taking over everything. But it's like, if you look at the economy, it's like internet related like revenue is like I don't know. I think it might be, maybe it's more now with AI, but at least back when this was written, it was like, you know, I don't know, 6% or 7% or something of like all the.
I thought that book sucked.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that good. Yeah.
He then says, the emperor in many cases has no clothes. Okay, another fucking cliche. And this is a shame, in part because I agree with a lot of these left-wing conclusions. I just wish people didn't argue for them so badly. And yeah, and one could complain the same of this guy.
I mean, anytime you go viral for something like this, I think you're going to get a lot of responses from people who are going to do a bad job of responding to it. All I can say to that is, look, we spent the time, we read it. If he's listening, like, we think you did a bad job, but we read it carefully.
But it is funny, like, how annoyed he got.
And look, this is a 20-year-old guy.
Yeah, exactly.
We've all been a 20-year-old guy. But if he hadn't doubled down 3 extra times, I don't know if we'd be doing this episode.
Like,
exactly.
He was wondering why this person wasn't debating him.
Yeah, so here
he tried to get a Hegelian scholar to debate him, right? And she's like, why don't you grow up a bit, maybe later? And he got pissed.
He's like, I have 3 publications, so I'm a scholar too.
I saw that too.
Oh, honey, oh my God.
And like, so just to like, exactly. And I was gonna say, like, you know, later in the article here,
I think I looked them up. They are decent publications, but it's on like ethics, not Hegel.
Now he says later in the article, I think, you know, now I have no doubt that somewhere in continental philosophy there are some arguments that aren't completely terrible. Most likely, some people have given arguments for some things at some point, but the field is mostly bogus, right? And then
so many seems and sums, and I'm sure's, like, oh my God.
And then he goes on to talk about the Sokol affair, that they apparently gave pretty decisive evidence. So, you know, it's funny. I also feel like the other thing is like that the other feeling that I had toward the end of this is like, I feel like you're just talking about like very narrow, like, as you said, Pills, almost like post-90s, like kind of post-structuralist and like postmodern. I don't think that he deserved. I mean, the problem is, like, you're on social media, you're going to get a lot of stupid responses from people who like seriously don't try to read it. But look, we read it. But then you're also kind of asking for it when you write it so obnoxiously. And obviously part of the reason it went so viral is because he wrote it so arrogantly and obnoxiously. Like he says at one point here, it wouldn't be so outrageous if continental philosophy was part of the literature department, but it's not. It's part of philosophy. If you explain to someone that you are interested in philosophy, they will think you are one of those guys, that you like people like Derrida rather than abhor them. It would be rather like if astronomy and astrology were located in one department.
Which, as far as I know, it got its foothold in all the literature departments. Like, you had the Yale School of Deconstruction, and you had all the literary theorists.
We covered Derrida's essay, White Mythology, which was all about clarity, specifically the word clarity and what it's associated with. And we spent 3 episodes on that. And that anticipates everything this guy says perfectly, because he
that's true,
consciously makes this split between analytic and continental, and then puts things underneath them. So under analytic is astronomy. Under continental is astrology. He compares them literally. He says analytic is clear water and continental is sludge.
Yeah, or stylistically like tar.
all the clarity, unclarity. He says Analytic is being awake and Continental is dreaming, and then straight up just says good and bad, like almost moral ascriptions here. Of course, it's good and bad, but he creates this entire world of opposites.
Yeah, exactly.
But like Derrida said, they're based on metaphors. So if you can listen to this paragraph, this is the paragraph I deconstructed. It would be surprising if the people with deep wisdom were unable to write clearly, nor communicate their insights in words with fewer than 7 syllables. Oh, now that's offensive too, I guess. Clear writing and clear thinking tend to go together, and in light of the completely bogus methods of argumentation, the prospects for Continental philosophy housing deep insights strikes me as rather dim. If you have serious things to say, you do not need to play word games. The jargon exists not to express arguments, but to cover up their absence. So I don't know if you want to play that back or whatever, but you can trust me. I broke it down. There's 13 metaphors in this, like not dead metaphors, like explicit metaphors. And of the 13 metaphors, 9 of them are visual. So he talks about clarity, insight, light, dim. And so out of 13, 9 are visual. Just in case there are analytics listening, I'm not saying here's a word and here's the history of these associative words. But we made the argument, or Derrida made the argument that took us 3 episodes to go through, that language is metaphoric. And the problem is he makes this split between poetic or literature departments and the philosophy department. This stuff belongs in the literature department, not the philosophy department, because the philosophy department deals with truth and clarity. But this is all metaphoric. He also goes on again about borrowing terms from other languages, which, like, that's kind of what language is, borrowing words from other language. That's the process of evolution. So he's saying at strictly this point in time, my feelings about what things are literature and philosophy, which are poetic and which are true, my feelings about them are what decide what they are. These things that I don't understand, they are sludge. These things that I do understand because they're very prosaic and quote unquote literal. I'm doing the thing. Quote unquote literal. There are metaphors too. And everything that he says is, this seems dim, dark, sludgy to me, whereas this other thing seems clear and enlightening. But there's no basis. There's no underlying basis for why he's splitting up all these terms and then Continental and Analytic into those 2 categories. He's making the 2 categories, but it's completely an arbitrary distinction that's not based on logic. There's no argument to back them up, at least here. I've never heard an argument to back them up. But in the end, this entire thing is based on his preferences. And the whole time he's arguing, saying, this has the compulsion of reason behind it. This has the compulsion of logical argumentation. There's not I don't think there's a single like syllogism that he makes in here. This is just his feelings. And now I will just defend him on the case that maybe he didn't intend people to read this. Maybe he thought that his analytic friends who already agreed with him would read it. That is contradicted by the fact that he doubled down on it. But there's no basis for the distinction that he makes except for his arbitrary dislike of one type of writing versus another type. There's no defense of one being more true, or even of his system being clearer than the alternatives. He's completely failed to demonstrate that, as we've been over. So his system of classification, his system of what is good in the world and what is bad, it doesn't have any argumentative basis here. The disagreement is aesthetic, emotive, based on the... I'm going to say signifiers, based on the signifiers that he has strung together. You know, clarity good, clarity true, things I don't understand, bad, things I don't understand, mud. It's systems of binaries, but it's a fantasy world that he's created. And yeah, this belongs in the fiction department if there is going to be a distinction made there.
I like that. That's good.
I'd have loved to see some actual comparisons, like, yeah, put some lines from analytic philosophy in there that you love so much.
There's analytic philosophers who say this about analytic philosophy too. Like Dennett says, analytic philosophy these days is just playing schmess, was his term, which is just playing these stupid language games. Language games itself comes from an analytic philosopher. Wittgenstein, who said this is bullshit what we're doing. We're just playing these stupid games with language and never realizing what language actually is. Like, logic does not stand on its own. It's a disciplinary structure. It's a methodology. And yeah, Continental writing has a different methodology than that. But you're not going to realize that at 21 years old, frankly. So it's...
I liked what Ben Burgess wrote about this, because he was responding to it, and he said, there are, however, other flaws that arise here that are much less likely to come up in more continental settings. Analytic philosophers, or at least some kinds of analytic philosophers, can spend an awful lot of time going down very deep rabbit holes that lead nowhere, making distinctions within distinctions on issues that might not have ever been worth anyone's time in the first place. Some of this probably stems from science envy. In the sciences, it can be normal to put tremendous effort into establishing some very small result that will later be published in a scientific journal. Mirroring this, analytic philosophers put a lot of work into journal articles dedicated to establishing very small, narrow points. The problem is that in the sciences, the small results add up to something, and I'm just not convinced that philosophy works that way. And I think that that's also like a fair thing.
Like, yeah. And he like anticipates what I always want to say when I encounter this kind of thing is like, go read like an article of dense physics, go read something of theoretical biology. See if you understand that in one shot. And he does try to anticipate this. You know, he says, I do actually read writings in many other fields, and I never have the complaints I do when reading continental philosophy, he says, complaints of grotesque unclarity and conceptual confusion. While there are many things I do not understand, mathematical formalisms, say, in no other domain do I encounter the kind of meandering, obscurantist illogic that I see in continental philosophy. I do not think this is a defense. He's getting defensive here. I do not think the problem is, therefore, my inability to read. It is their inability to write. He's getting defensive about being accused of being illiterate there. But I mean, look at that claim. In no other domain do I encounter the kind of meanderings, blah, 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 obscurantist illogic. I find that hard to believe. There are plenty of things out there to read that are extremely difficult. It just depends on what your assumptions about the thing you're reading are. I'm not going to go read like Einstein's original works on relativity because I probably won't understand them. But I'll make this assumption that, oh, there's some like deep clarity. There's the metaphors again underlying all of it, and that it's saying something true. And then I'm going to go out and read a text by Derrida and think that there's some deep confusion and that what it's really saying is just not true or relevant, neither here nor there. And I'm just going to make those assumptions before I read these texts, and then that's it, done and done, which is what he's basically doing. He would read Einstein and be like, well, I don't understand it, but I know it's true. He reads Derrida, well, I don't understand it, but I know it's all false.
That's just feelings.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bogus.
The things that I like, I feel like they must be true. The things that I don't like, I feel like they must be false.
Bogus. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually the opposite of Derrida's method, which is close attention to what is on the page.
Yeah, like Descartes. Descartes is only brought up in the negative. I guess Einstein is too. If you call someone an Einstein, it's guaranteed to be an insult. But Derrida, for some reason, has got just such a shitty end of the stick, only brought up in the negative, only brought up as an obscurantist by only people who have never read any of his work. And I realize that's a conventional response, but how can you be allowed to criticize something that you either have not read or read and said, I don't understand this, therefore it's bad?
Yeah, I believe that. I haven't taken the time. But I believe it.
Okay, so if we're done, I will just use one of his own lines to refute his whole project here.
Okay.
Yeah, let's have it.
Okay, so this is the one thing he doesn't like, and see if you can see how this is exactly what he's doing. When the word one is fixating on is specific, it is generally not too difficult to talk one out of one's confusion. Do people still write like this using one, the third person?
I don't know.
If a person thinks that infinity isn't confusing because it's a concept, or the Socrates, I don't know what that is, the Socrates paradox is easy because it's vague when something is a heap, you can explain why that doesn't work. But if one is using vague terms and thinking unclearly, then it will be impossible to talk them out of their view.
Yeah.
They always have the muddled concept to fall back on.
Yeah.
They can always say something amorphous and act like the problem goes away. End quote.
I mean, that's exactly what he's doing. Yeah, yeah.
He even defended his use. Like I'm saying that his term continental philosophy ultimately just describes things he doesn't like. It has no other. It has no other referent. And he says, he says, "Oh, I got pushback for using the term continental philosophy." When some people have informed me, actually, there's good continental philosophy. And then he doubles down and says, in this article, I'll continue using the phrase continental philosophy, even though there might be some good kinds. I'm talking fairly generally about the field, but I don't intend to speak universally. I'll continue using the term because there isn't a better one to refer to what I have in mind. But note, I'm not being precise or I'm not being totally precise. Now, this is an absolutely insane admission. It is insane. Because he's saying, I'm using my language to refer to this thing in my head, which is called continental philosophy because there's no better term for it.
Yeah,
it's something he doesn't like. He clearly has no experience with what everyone else calls continental philosophy. But the thing that he doesn't like, he's going to keep calling that even though it's not precise. He's saying, I know this term is wrong, but I'm continuing to use it because it corresponds to the thing I have in my head that I don't like. So it's literally, he just admits, hey, I'm arguing about something that is my feelings about something that exists inside my mind that I'm calling continental philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
He makes a very specific claim, like continental philosophy is bad and they don't make arguments. But I'm using all these terms vaguely and imprecisely. So if you accuse me of being wrong based on what I'm actually saying, then I'll just say, well, I meant something else anyway, or like,
Oh, you can't attack me because I'm only being imprecise for this particular article. Hey, look, he actually does know what a Motte and Bailey is.
Exactly.
Oh, great. So you get to choose like when, so you're upset about Motte and Bailey arguments, but you can just go between being precise and specific and vague and not very specific. And that's okay. When you get attacked, it's like, oh, okay. You can just like retreat into your vague cloud of I'm not using these words very precisely, but I'm going to keep using them anyway. I love how by the third article he's basically just asking people to fight him at this point. If you repeatedly suggest that a person is irredeemably idiotic, and then debate them, either you win the debate resoundingly, you do okay and sort of hold your own, you get trounced. 3, you get trounced. I suspect, in fact, many people recognize if they accepted the debate offer, there's a reasonable chance that things would have gone the third way. As in, he's going to trounce you, bitch. Don't debate this guy.
Well, if he wants to debate me, I'll debate him.
Why did this one pop off? Like, I'm sure there's hundreds of articles per year written in the same cadence by the same type of guy. Honestly, it popped off because it's so stupid and it's such a poorly done.
I think that's why. I genuinely think that that's the reason why, is because I don't know how many followers he has on Substack, but I imagine like
10K.
Some like 10K. Okay, and
well,
I don't know
10K now. I don't know how much.
Yeah, maybe it was like, but it was probably over like it was probably like a couple thousand at least, right? Like, so he probably had an audience. And then he came out with this drivel, and then I think that people were just genuinely like, wow, this is so bad, and just wanted to make fun of it. Just bored on Twitter. Like, I think that's why, because he had like some kind of a smallish, medium-ish audience on Substack, and it was so bad. So I think those two things combined caused it to go viral.
Oh yeah, that was your original question posting this, Pills. It's like, why did this one go? Why did this one pop off? Like, Yeah, I don't know.
Well, how many people still write about this too, right? Like this is such a, I mean, in a way it is such a boring old question that we've also covered on the Pill Pod at least once, maybe twice. We've talked about Continental versus Analytic, but I think maybe twice.
The thing about like good or like, I don't know, maybe not good, seasoned analytic philosophers or seasoned continental philosophers, they at least have a begrudging respect for the good people on the other side.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
I disparage analytic philosophy almost entirely because of my preferences and slightly because I don't think it understands its method in terms of semiotics. But if you but I've brought this up to analytic philosophers and they say, yeah, but that's not what we're doing. Like they don't care. They don't care about what language is in terms of using their arguments because they believe that logic is something different than what I believe it is. And they know that. They know that. They're not stupid. They go, yeah, but that's not our game. We're playing this game. We're playing Schmess. And over there, some of them are good at playing Schmess. Some of them are exceptional at playing Schmess. And some are not very good at playing Schmess. Just like over here on the Continental side, there are some people who are good at it and some people who are not good at it. And yeah, it's true that ours might have more in common with literature, or at least the figurative dimension of language, because the things that we say are up for debate are themselves meaning and interpretation. And to figure out meaning and our interpretation of meaning, you cannot always write in a strictly conventional style because another part of our discipline is being distrusting of conventions and where they come from and what they're supposed to be doing. So sometimes to get around a convention that you or see everyone else going around in circles within, you need to bend and fuck with your medium a little bit. And you got to bend language and shift concepts to see what happens. And they will call us unclear for that, but they are both games. There are good players and bad players. They're not the same game. This is confusion. They're not actually the same game. They're different games. But it takes a real idiot to say, oh, everyone over there, they're all idiots.
And it's also really interesting. There's like very notable examples of analytic philosophers and vice versa who like take some continental arguments seriously and translate them and say that there's real insight. Like right away, I can kind of think of, well, Richard Rorty obviously is like a good example of someone, but then also like I feel like Donald Davidson, who's like huge in analytic philosophy of language. I think there's people, I don't know if he did this.
Rorty loved him too.
Rorty loved him. And like I feel like
doing
people
is rewriting scraps of Davidson, he said.
And there's actually a really interesting, I've heard but have not engaged myself. There are some people who have offered persuasive accounts that say that there's actually a lot of overlap between Davidson and Derrida about like their views of language. That like if you go and read like Davidson, like that he's giving an account that is at least in some ways compatible with what Derrida says. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I've heard.
That's what I wrote my master's thesis on.
Oh, did you? Okay, so maybe I forgot. But like, so do you agree with that?
It was a while ago. It was a while ago since I read this, so I can't actually recall exactly what his theory of language is. Okay. But the paper in general was on metaphor as not being a unit of language, but rather it's like a principle or a tendency, like a fundamental function of what language does is use metaphors at its boundaries to generate itself, to basically expand. Now, I don't even remember exactly what Donald Davidson's view of language was. I'm sure it wasn't that far. I'm sure it wasn't like all the way that I was going with it, which is structuralist, Jacobson, all that. But I think that he had a wide scope, to use a visual metaphor, of the position of metaphor in language, much more than you'd expect from an analytic philosopher, or at least most of them, because most of them actually say similar things to what this guy is saying, like, analytic philosophy is a place for clarity. Metaphor is just saying what you want to say, except more complicatedly, when you could just be straightforward and say A is B. Instead, you're saying A is to B is C is to D. So you're necessarily complicating something rather than creating anything. And my point, and I think Donald Davidson's point, was that no, metaphor is not just a more complicated way of saying something more simple. It's actually generative. It's actually creating something.
And then there's those big crossing moments. And then there's like, like someone like Wittgenstein too, who crosses over kind of, right? Starts off with his first text very logical positivism, then philosophical investigations, much more pragmatist, to say the least. And then Lyotard picks that up and runs with that. And then you get postmodernism out of what Lyotard's talking about, using language games as a method, basically using the language games methodology. So you have these massive crossover moments. And then I frequently imagine, like, where would you put Luhmann? Does he even give a shit? Where would you put Charles Sanders Peirce if the divide existed when he was around? You probably couldn't. Let's use his game and get ChatGPT to answer why did this article pop off when so many other articles are probably written in a similar tenor. It's because it tapped into long-standing intense rivalries between analytic and continental traditions in academic philosophy. Several key factors, provocative generalizations. I like this one.
Yeah.
The article made sweeping, often humorous or critical generalizations about the methods and styles of an entire branch of philosophy. While many such articles are written, this one resonated widely due to its sharp, unequivocal tone. Juxtapositions of academic cultures. That's a long one.
I mean, that first one I think strikes me as right. Basically, it's bad and provocative.
Well, you know what we have said about 20-year-olds since the day we started this podcast.
Yeah.
20-year-olds have just discovered a little bit of knowledge, but they're too stupid to actually realize how stupid they are, especially men, especially boys.
Yeah, because you are thinking you have the growing apparatus of an adult brain, but the like stupidity of a child, kind of, and you don't realize it.
Yes, they have the lattice work of intelligence, but the vines of wisdom have not yet grown on it.
Exactly.
There's a metaphor for you, hot off the press.
And an aberrant interest, because 20-year-olds maybe aren't usually interested in getting involved in like analytic continental philosophy blogosphere debates, but he apparently was interested in directing his youthful frontal lobe still developing man energy into shit posting continental philosophers. So yeah. There you go.
And I said earlier that I would debate him. I don't know that I would actually debate him, but I would talk to him. I'm curious. Like, do you seriously think that this is like a good article? Like that's like it's like, explain to me like what you think is good about this.
Well, he does. As of 3 days ago, he's still doubling down.
Yeah. Like explain to me like, yeah, like that's, I'm like more curious, but yeah, I mean, sure that could turn into debate, but
like
if he wants to.
Is this a hill that you're just trying to die on, or is this all just kind of a joke in a game?
You didn't answer this, guys. Would you have failed this if it were like a fourth?
Yeah.
Of course. Would you have failed it if it were like second year?
Well, I mean, it's hard to imagine how someone could have written this, but like, I guess I'm imagining like if the assignment was like, maybe the class was something like the history of philosophy or something like a kind of survey course. Comparing, and actually I took a class like this in graduate school that kind of talked about the divide between analytic and continental. Yeah, and in that case, I'm like thinking, I feel like it might have been someone who wrote, I remember we read this like one of those very short introduction books from Oxford University Press, and there was like a very short introduction to continental philosophy. And yeah, like if those were the readings, and I don't really remember that much about this class, and then like he just submitted this, yeah, that would be a fail. That would be a fail for sure. I'd be like, yeah, you didn't actually engage with the text in a way that was like charitable or like put in much effort. I mean, using ChatGPT, yeah, fail for sure. What do you mean? There's ChatGPT quotes here? Like, yes.
Yeah. And it's not balanced. And exactly what you say, like you can't make an argument about continental philosophers or you just can't. You don't do that. It doesn't make, it's not because it's not.
You know that if a book has continental philosophy in the title, it has to be like a minimum 500 pages. That's a tome.
It's not because it's incoherent or that you can't say anything true about continental philosophy in general. It's just that you cannot write an argumentative paper. It's like those papers you get that start like since the beginning of time or mankind has always. You know, the next thing after that is going to be dog shit if it's introducing an argument, you know, unless you're going to say since the beginning of time, man has always had two legs. Okay, well, I guess that's true. Not strictly, but
I did this once. I did this in undergrad where I submitted a paper, and I think it was about German idealism. And I said German idealism is seeking or assumes a sort of univocity in language. And the prof, thankfully, like gave it back to me and said, if I mark this right now, this was like third year. It said if I mark this right now, it's a fail, because what you are calling German idealism is actually just two books from two guys, and you don't know what you're talking about. And here's a list of all the people who don't do the thing that you're saying. So this was a learning experience I'm grateful for, one that I hope that this little fellow, Mr. Bulldog, will have as well, because it knocked me on my ass in the stage of my 20-year-old mind where I thought I was the king shit. I thought I was coming up. I was going to knock down fucking Hegel and Schleiermacher in one blow in an undergraduate essay.
And it is unfortunate that like it happened on Twitter, because like I'm sympathetic to him getting like a lot of unfair attacks calling him an idiot, because it's just less likely to have that effect, right? It's less likely to have the effect that you're talking about, Pills, because he probably gets so many implements.
Yeah, it's probably idiots who are calling him an idiot, and they may be right, but they're idiots too. But when a prof says it to you, then you're like, oh shit, I really fucked up. And I was so excited about bringing my German idealism paper into philosophy class, only to have someone who I respected and who I knew more than me tell me to sit my ass down and shut up. This is the cure to unearned confidence in male 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And he quote tweeted a bunch of those idiots, right? I remember I think he quote tweeted people who he like challenged them, and then they admitted, well, I didn't actually read it. I just like looked at the title and like saw other people talking about it. And it's like, yeah, of course, when you have idiots like that doing that, then you're not going to like learn the lesson, right?
And then he takes these people who are calling him an idiot and calling him illiterate as like representatives of continental philosophy. When they're just other idiots on the internet, because that's what the internet is just a place full of idiots who are yelling about things. and it's kind of harsh. It is kind. I do sympathize. I agree. I like having him get into this. I mean, it looks like he's just in the forest right now. I mean, I'm sure he's fine, whatever, but it just looks like he's learning some weird lesson.
Nah, he seems just happy as a pig and shit. He's not.
He's not
learning a lesson.
He's a debate bro. He's loving it. He's fucking he's loving it. Yeah, he's loving like owning the idiots who are responding to him.
There's no remorse here.
He's reveling in this. Like most kids are out there playing like Fortnite or something, swearing at each other, but he's like starting shit on Twitter with continental philosophy.
But evidently he didn't read the comment, because on every single one of his articles, there's just tons of comments. Most of them are like engaging in good faith, saying, well, I think you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, like very, very patient responses, but none of the...
Yeah, he did get a lot of those.
Yeah, there are a lot. And yet none of them have been incorporated into his follow-up works, except for him saying, oh, I know people have said that I'm using the term continental philosophy wrong, but I'm actually going to just keep saying that because that's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell he's really focusing on the negative comments here, which is kind of telling.
Yeah, like the stupid comments, like the ones that he can easily like be like, these people are idiots, but kind of ignores the good ones, which you're right, Pills. There's a lot of people, I think, who responded and were trying to respond in good faith. I think that's true, but he kind of ignored those.
Mistake one. Good faith on the internet.
And these are reasons why I do suspect his motives a little bit, saying like, yeah, this was meant to stir shit, get a reaction, repost those reactions as like evidence for his original argument, which is exactly the process he went through. Like this also, as heartbreaking as it seems, if you cast this as like the story Pills was saying about kind of finding out in the wrong way that you don't know everything. he's also seems like he's trying to. This is the desired outcome.
Yeah,
is just starting all this shit and getting attention, like I said in the beginning.
Well, you have a very conspiratorial mind here, Eric, because I'm going to say never attribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity.
Yeah.
Well, when
20-year-old.
You know what? Maybe I feel it because I was this guy. I was like, I'm in philosophy 305. I am going to defeat German idealism.
Yeah.
And before I got my ass handed to me by a sympathetic professor who probably was the same when he was 20. All right?
Exactly.
We all have our phase.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
well
true.
put. I think that's a good point.
When you put it that way, it's hard to argue.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we did
Good
it.
place to end. That was fun. Eric, are you glad we did it? It wasn't that bad, right? Wasn't it a fun discussion?
Yeah, I'll admit it. But the shit I go through here, I do want to read something nice.
Well, why don't you pick the next one?
But
Pick the next
I
one.
want to read something nice, and like in the chat, he's posting Horkheimer. Like, oh,
The day before, too, by the way, listeners. The day before we're supposed to record, he's like, this article sucks. I don't want to do it.
I don't want to read this. Let's read Horkheimer. Not that Horkheimer's that hard. Like, what?
He's like, and it's
where's
the day before.
We should give Frankfurt School to this guy. It's easy.
Yeah, the clear days when they made arguments.
All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.